Hey, it's your girl Michelle, otherwise known as bookedwithSmitty, and I am back with another video. And this time around, I'll be discussing the books that I read in the month of June, and I'll be giving you my ratings, my views, and telling you why I decided to read those books in the month of June. So this is otherwise known as June Wrap-Up, so let's get into it. All right, let's get into this book list here. So the first book that I read in the month of June was The Arithmetist by Brandon Sanderson. Now, The Arithmetist is a fantasy young adult book, and I have been trying to get into the fantasy genre for a while. I tried Sarah J. Maas, and it just was rough in the beginning, and so I did some research, and people were saying that Brandon Sanderson was an easier read, so I looked at his books and I decided to read a standalone book rather than dive into one of his many books that was a series. Just in case I didn't like the book, it would be easy to just stop reading any of his books. But I actually love The Arithmetist. So even though it started off rough for me, because like I said, fantasy is not the easiest genre for me to get into. The language is just, whew. But I managed to get through. After the fourth chapter, it started making sense to me. So in this book, The Arithmetist, Joel, who's the protagonist, wants to be a arithmetist. Now, arithmetists have the power to infuse life into two-dimensional figures known as chalklins. Now, Joel, who is a student at Arithmetist Academy, wants to be a arithmetist, but in order to be a arithmetist, you have to take this special test, and he doesn't pass the test. So he can only go to the academy and watch all the other students who are arithmetists do all the arithmetist things that they do, and hope that he can one day be a arithmetist. Yeah, the language isn't something that I'm normally used to, so it took me a while to get into it. But once I got into it, I was just like, I could not put this book down. I think I was up in the middle of the night reading it because I wanted to know what was going to happen. So this book was a 5-star book for me. I really, ideally, should have rated it a 4.5 star, but it's a 5-star for me. Now, the next book I read was Homefront by Kristen Hanna. Now, Kristen Hanna has this reputation of writing depressing books. This is not an author that I would normally read, or I shouldn't say author, I should say genre that I would normally read. This is a fiction, romance, contemporary type of book, and I like to read mysteries. But in the book club that I'm in, the 52 Book Club, where you have to read 52 books in 52 weeks, there's 52 prompts, and the idea is that you could read a book that matches the prompt a week, or you could read multiple books. So here it is, July, and I've read 48 out of the 52 prompts, and Kristen Hanna was coming up, and I had to read it. So I did some research and found a book that was the shortest book of hers that didn't seem so threatening. And I actually like the book Homefront. So Homefront is about a married couple who's going through some tough times, like they're on the verge of divorce. They have 2 kids. One is a teenage girl, and the other one is a younger girl. The twist is that the mom ends up getting deployed back into the army, and we see how life is like for a family where the mom goes off to war. Now, we normally hear about it the other way around, where the dad goes back and he gets deployed into war, but in this case, it's the mom who gets deployed, and she gets deployed right at the time where her teenage daughter really needs her mom, and the teenager is going through all sorts of meltdown, and like I said, they're having a tough marriage, or they're on the brink of divorce. But in this book, you'll find out what happened to the parents and the family. It was actually page turner. This was a book that I couldn't put down either. I rated it 4 stars. Surprisingly, I didn't think I would like it. I thought it would be depressing. It actually just turned out to be a story that most people probably, the average household probably goes through, and so it just made sense to me. So the next book I read was Wondersmith, which is the sequel to Nevermore: The Trials of Morrigan Crow. So Morrigan Crow is a girl who's cursed, and having been born on Eventide, which is the unluckiest day for any child to be born, she's blamed for all the misfortunes that happens in her town, from hailstorms to heart attacks, like anything that goes wrong, she's the blame for it. And the town pretty much is like, we don't want her to do nothing, don't look at nothing, don't touch nothing, because you're that unlucky. But she ends up getting whisked away to this wondrous society. So here in Wondersmith, she's been invited to join this prestigious, wondrous society. And so she has to deal with the people in this wondrous society who don't believe she belongs there. So now, this was hard for a girl because remember, if you read Nevermore, then you know in Nevermore she wasn't accepted by the people in her town who wasn't anything like her. Now she's in a town where the people are like her and they still don't think that she belongs here. So this is the story Wondersmith by Jessica Townsend. This book I rated a 3-star. Nevermore to me was a 5-star book, and I couldn't put that one down. But Wondersmith, I just was, oh my gosh, it wasn't bad, it just wasn't good either. It was just a book that I just read and finished. So hopefully the next book, Holopox, will be much better than Wondersmith. Sometimes the sequel can sort of fall because you were, especially if the first book was really, really good, the second book never seemed to taper off, in my opinion, as well as the first book did. But hopefully, that's different for the third book. Okay, the next book I read was The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. So this is a poetry, young adult contemporary type of book. And in this book, a young girl in Harlem discovers slam poetry as a way to understand her mother's religion and her own relationship to the world. So I rated this book a 5-star. Even though this book is over 300 pages, it's like 368 pages. It really, I'm telling you, this book went by so fast. It didn't feel like it was almost 400 pages. It really reminded me of when I was in high school and I used to write poetry, and I still sometimes do write poetry. It just took me back to that time. It just was an awesome book. Now, this is not a book that I normally read, but I ended up reading this book because, again, with the 52 book club that I'm in, this was one of the 52 prompts where I had to read a book by an author who had a National Book Award. And The Poet X won a National Book Award. It won a Young People's Literature National Book Award in the year of 2018. So I was like, let me take a stab at it. It cannot be so bad. It was highly rated amongst people. So I was like, okay, I'm not really into reading other people's poetry, even though I write poetry, but I took a stab at it and I was like so amazed by this book, so much so that I wanted to read her next book, which is Clap When You Land. So that book is in my Libby basket as we speak. That book will probably be on my July wrap-ups. All right, the next book I read was Charmed, which is the sequel to Flunked, which is a fantasy middle grade fairy tale type of book. Now, in this book, this book is by Jen Kalonita. I hope I'm saying her name correctly. In this book, the protagonist Gilly Cobbler's parents, in the first book, I actually flunked. Her parents told her that if she messes up 3 times, that they will send her to fairy tale reform school. So she gets caught stealing, and she gets whisked away to fairy tale reform school. Now, fairy tale reform school is a school where anybody who is placed in that school cannot leave that school until they have shown that they have turned over a new leaf. And surprisingly, in this book, the principal, the teachers, everybody that's in charge of the book are like the wolf. Remember the wolf from the fairy tale? What is it? Red Riding Hood, I believe, and then the Wicked Stepmother, Cinderella's wicked stepmothers in the book. So they run the school. And they run the school because they've been through the school. They've been through the fairy tale reform school themselves, and they have turned over a new leaf. They are no longer wicked, and they are training all the other students to not be wicked anymore. They cannot have their wicked ways. So in this book, Charm, you see what happens the second go round. Now, in this book, Gilly Cobra can leave Fairy Tale Reform School, but she chooses to stay because there's some evilness going on, and she wants to help get rid of the evilness that's going on in this school. So, although this book was interesting, it wasn't a 5-star for me. Flunked was a 5-star, but again, here we go with that second book read where it just did not cut it for me. So, hopefully, the next book will be better, but this one was a 3-star book for me. All right, the next book that I read was Wordbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. Yes, another Brandon Sanderson's book. Now, Brandon Sanderson's book, Wordbreaker, was a complicated book for me to read. This book was a complicated book for me to read in the beginning because it just was a lot going on. Normally when I read, I like to multitask. I'm usually reading or watching TV, playing a game or something else. This is not one of those books, in my opinion, that you can multitask. So if I read this book without doing any other stuff, this would probably be a 4, maybe 5-star book, but as it stands now, this is a 3-star book. And this was one of those heavy chunkers. This was like 688 pages. But it was an interesting book. The premise in this book, there are 2 sisters. One sister has been trained her whole life to be the wife of the godson, and the other sister, she pretty much lives her life however she wants to live her life. No one pays attention to her. She's sort of rebellious in a way where, because she's not used to any rules, she does whatever she wants to do. But at the very last second, the father decides to swap the sisters, and the sister who's not used to any rules is sent to marry the godson. And we find out what happens when she's sent to marry the godson, and the other sister, who is used to all the rules, is not sent to marry the godson. So it turned out to be a very interesting story. It just was so difficult and complicated for me to understand in the beginning. Like I said, fantasy is not the easiest for me to read. But I'm getting better with it. I'm determined to get better with it. Like, I just want to be able to read it. I want to be able to read and multitask. That's what I want to do because I need to read and multitask. All right, so the next book I read was Amari and the Night Brothers. And other than the cover being so gorgeous, the story was awesome. So this is B.B. Austin's first book. Let me show you again. So this is B.B. Austin's first book. He's actually made, I believe a month ago, he made the New York Times bestsellers list. So that's how awesome the book is. So in this book, Amari Peters has a brother named Quentin Peters. Now, Quentin Peters was the golden boy of the Rosewood Low-Income Housing Projects, and he received 4 scholarships to 2 different Ivy League schools. But then he goes missing. So Amari Peters decides that she wants to go find her brother. She wants to go find the truth. She gets accepted into this prestigious Ivy League school that he was accepted into, but for a different reason. And so the story is about her finding out what happened to her brother. Now, a lot of people are talking about the black girl magic that Amari Peters exudes in his book, and I totally agree with it. But I love this book for a different reason. I love the messages that the protagonist that she says in the book about herself. She uplifts herself throughout the book because there are bullies that constantly, talk down to her because of where she grew up at, and they tell her she has no business being there. You're just, somebody from the projects, like you're nobody. And she reminds herself. She doesn't tell them. She tells herself, because at the end of the day, you have to uplift yourself. What I love about Amari is that she says things like, people are going to form opinions and say nasty things about you based on nothing more than what you are. the bottom line is that you have to know yourself and you have to stay true to who you are and not to let anybody steal your joy and your dreams. And Amari Peter does just that. When they try to cancel her, she still is like, look, I'm going to find my brother. I don't know what y'all going to do, but I'm going to find my brother. I'm going to do what I need to do to find my brother. And she doesn't let what anybody say about her deter her. And so that's what I love about her. These are messages that we can teach our students. So I'm a teacher, and if I was reading this with my students, that would be one of the messages that I would teach my students. We would have discussions about that because it's important for especially kids nowadays in this society with social media. You have to love yourself and not let anybody steal your joy. So that was a 5-star book if I didn't mention it. So Amari and the Night Brothers, I mentioned, is a middle grade book. Even though it's a middle grade book, you can read it if you're an adult. You can read it if you're a young adult. It doesn't have to be just for middle grade books. Look, do not sleep, FYI, do not sleep on middle grade books. Authors that are writing for middle grades have really upped the game from back in the day when I was in middle grade book. Look, let me just show you. Here is a middle grade book that I was reading when I was in middle grade book. Now, don't get me wrong. I love Encyclopedia Brown. I read them all and I'll read them again. But they're like 50 pages, 60 pages long, if that. Probably why I read so much, because the books were so much smaller. But nowadays, these books that are middle grade, like look at all the Harry Potter books, those were marketed for middle grade, and it became young adults and adults that were reading it more than middle grade books. But here's another middle grade book. This is my camera. So here's another middle grade book, Keeper of the Lost Cities. Never seen. This is one of the sequels to the Keeper of the Lost Cities. Look how thick this book is. Now, this book is almost 700 pages and it's marketed for middle grade. Now, young adults are reading these books too. So, like I said, do not sleep on middle grade books at all. Not only are the content a lot heavier, there's a lot more messages that are in middle grade books. The length of it is so much longer. And the last book I read was The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas. Yeah, I know I mentioned Sarah J. Maas was a difficult read. That was because I was reading The Throne's Glass. And upon doing my research, I learned that there was The Assassin's Blade, which came before The Throne's Glass, and it's really intro to the characters. And so it's 5 novellas in this book, and you get an idea of who the main characters are. And this book is just action-packed with a lot of adventure. So other than the fact that I had to sort of remember what was going on, it was a 4-star for me. That was the only reason that made it not a 5-star. It was a 4-star for me. But I tell you now, I am ready to read The Throne of Glass, having read The Assassin's Blade. So, look, you don't have to read The Assassin's Blade. You can just go right into The Throne of Glass. But like for me and a newly fantasy reader, this made sense for me to read The Assassin's Blade. So now I feel a little bit more confident to read The Throne of Glass. So, yeah. And so with that said, those are the 8 books that I read for the month of June. If you like what you see, hit the like, hit the subscribe, and write comments below. Also, my Instagram will be linked below. My Goodreads, you can see the books that I'm reading, will be linked below. And come on back. Have a blessed day.